It is here. It is finally draft day. The first day of the draft is finally here. We're going to break it all down here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We've got Jenna Harner from Channel 11 WPXI. She's back. We're going to do our full first round mock drafts, show you all the different things that can happen. Who are the Steelers going to take at 20? All that here answered on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting app and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by our sponsors at Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and I'm a big fan of Monopoly Go. The mobile hit twist on the classic game Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go today, now free on the App Store and Google Play. As I said before, we're joined by Jenna Harner of Channel 11 WXI. She is back. It's been a minute since we had Jenna on, but I was like, we gotta get Jenna on the day before the draft, the day of the draft, to get her insights. Jenna, how have you been?
It has been far too long, but I am so glad to be back. And what better day? It's draft day. The excitement is here. All the mock drafts, everything we've been building up to, all the talk, who's going, where, who the Steelers going to take, all those things. Those will be decided tonight. And I don't know about you, Chris, but I'm pretty hyped.
I'm very hyped right now. There's so many things that can happen here in this mock draft. Not this mock draft, the actual draft that's going to happen here. We have both our full first round mocks of how we see this potentially playing out, just like we did last year. And hey, last year, so we play a game where in the full first round mock, we don't allow any trades. Trades are going to happen, but we make every pick as the teams are there. You get a point for every team that you match to the correct player that they select, and a point for every player that you match to the correct spot that they're selected in. So, for example, we both probably picked Caleb Williams going to the Bears at first overall. That's 2 points right there if that happens. But let's say the Steelers select Talise Fuaga, but they traded up to get him, like last year, Broderick Jones at 14. But I picked Broderick Jones at 20, that would have been 1 point. So that's how we play the game. Last year, Jenna won this game. She got more picks. Yes, you did. Yeah, you eked me out by a single point because of one of your later round picks. So you were very clutch in that last year. So let's look at how we have set up the boards for ourselves this year in going over our mocks. These are our first round mocks. If you're viewing them on YouTube, we thank you for watching us on YouTube. We will explain them as best we can here on the for our audio listeners here. We have identical starts to this draft through the first 7 picks.
1 through 7.
1 through 7. This is crazy because it's funny. I did this with Brian Batko at the Post Gazette with the North Shore Drive podcast. So if you've seen my picks on there, you know where I'm picking in a lot of places. But Caleb Williams to the Bears, Jaden Daniels, the quarterback to the Commanders, Drake May to the Patriots, Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Cardinals, Malik Neighbors to the Chargers, Rome Odunze to the Giants, and then Joe Alt to the Titans. All 7 of those picks we agree on being the top of the draft. And full acknowledging, Jenna, there could very well be some trades that happen to quarterbacks in the first 5 picks. I think the Chargers are a prime spot for if the Vikings want to trade up and get J.J. McCarthy. But I still see this kind of being how it plays out. Malik Neighbors going before Rome Odunze. And whenever those receivers run out, that's when we start to see Joe Alt and other guys start to come off the board.
Yep. Nope, I completely agree. I also don't count out the New York Football Giants potentially making a trade for J.J. McCarthy, and I don't know how I feel about that, but you know what? Hey, anything can happen. We'll get there later tonight and see how things all shake out. I like where the Giants are drafting no matter what because you're going to get a star player. I, of course, without the trades, was going with Rome Odunze, but don't be surprised. You might see it.
Absolutely. We could see it here. And that's what's really interesting is how many quarterbacks go before the Steelers pick. And if you're the Steelers, you kind of want all the quarterbacks to go because you're not going to get your shot at a Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels. You're not going to get a shot at a game-changing, obvious quarterback in this draft class. So just quickly glancing over it, you have JJ. We both have JJ McCarthy going to the Vikings at 11th overall, kind of representing either they'll get him there or they'll trade up to get him.
Yeah.
But neither of us have another quarterback after McCarthy going in the top 20, whereas some people have Michael Penix, Bo Nix. Actually, no, excuse me. I have Bo Nix going 12th overall to the Broncos. So I have a quarterback. You don't have Bo Nix there. But it's interesting to see how the rest plays out. We both have the Falcons taking an edge rusher, the Bears taking defensive players. You have Quinyon Mitchell. I have Byron Murphy. You have Brock Bowers to the Jets. I have Olu Fashanu. But then it's interesting to see how the board falls the rest of the way. I have Quinyon Mitchell going at 13 to the Raiders. You have them taking Terrion Arnold. So same position, just different players based off of who's available there. Both of us have the Saints taking offensive tackles. You have Fashanu out of Penn State. I have Faltanu out of Washington. And then again, we have very similar minds here, Jenna.
I like this. I like this a lot. Yeah. And then obviously the Colts going some corner guy in their secondary. Although Cooper DeJean is so interesting to me, and I know a lot of people have talked about him kind of throughout the draft. Just his versatility. I know the Steelers loved him and the versatility that he brings, but will he be there at 20? Because that's going to be intriguing to me. And we'll talk Steelers more. I'll let you lead that part of the discussion. But like, I just feel like if the draft does kind of fall like this, it really does seem to fall in favor of the Steelers with where you and I both have got certain guys going.
Absolutely. And that's the thing here. And this is what I keep emphasizing to people. There are 6 legitimate offensive tackles the Steelers could take at 20th overall and be very confident in that being worth the pick. In my opinion, Jenna, those 6 include, well, Joe Alt, who we know isn't going to get past 7 to the Titans. But Olu Fashanu, who's probably going to go very early, but also Talaise Fuaga out of Oregon State, Troy Faltanu out of Washington, J.C. Latham out of Alabama, and Amarius Mims out of Georgia. Any of those 6, if one of those 6 guys falls to 20, the Steelers are going to be happily sprinting to the podium and just being like, we got our offensive tackle to pair with Broderick Jones for the long term, because all of these guys project as guys in normal years where there weren't 6 guys that could go in the top 20. These guys would be probably all top 10 type of prospects.
I could not agree more. And this is going to be such an offensive line heavy first round. It really seems to feel like, I know there's so much talk about the fact that there's the chance that this draft could feature 3 first round centers for the first time in history. You have the strength and tackles, and then you just have a lot of really versatile guys. And something that's super interesting to me, I tweeted this out the other day. I kind of went back and was listening to my one-on-one interview with Steelers general manager Omar right after he and the rest of the Steelers coaching staff returned from the combine. Khan made a really interesting point to me when I had asked him, this was just after they had released Mason Cole. I said, what's your plan here? Do you guys, and this was before they'd made moves in free agency, I said, do you guys look to bring in free agents? Are you looking to add through the draft? How do you kind of balance all of that? And he talked about the free agents, and obviously that stuff is long gone. But when we were talking about the draft specifically, he made a really interesting point where he said to me, look, there's this draft is really, really fascinating and really deep with a lot of centers. He paused for a half second and then goes, center capable guys as well. So the little addition there for me, that was something that I was like, He felt the need to add that. And then he also felt the need to add about position versatility. And I think there are so many players that have that positional versatility that can play multiple spots on the line that if any of these guys, even throw Graham Barton in there, and obviously, he's a tackle. I was going to say, I thought he was a guard, but he was a tackle. Throw some of those guys in there. You can get a guy that's not necessarily a strict center that is center capable. And I think that might be what the Steelers do with that 20th pick. But hey, that's just my prediction right now.
No, listen, I hear that. Graham Barton, I have as my top center on the board, particularly because he's trained at center. He played center as a freshman at Duke. We've talked about that with Alan Saunders. I want to talk more about who the Steelers actually do take at 20th overall, both of our picks and where other directions they could go here, as well as other moves they've made leading into draft day that could influence what could be happening here. All that here and more on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Jenna Harner, stick with us. We got a lot to discuss. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Now, I don't know about you all, but I have a competitive side. To me, I'm a competitive person, and it all stems back to when I grew up. We played a lot of game nights when I was a kid, and when we played game nights, we played all these different games, but it all came down to Monopoly. That was our Super Bowl, and if you won Monopoly, it was like you had the championship belt, and you could wear it over your shoulder all week long and talk all the trash you want. And now I can have a championship belt every single day by downloading Monopoly Go as an app right on my phone. Right now, if you download Monopoly Go, it's an amazing mobile game that you can download right now. And in fact, it's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a new twist on Monopoly where you play on hundreds of different Monopoly boards in crazy locations and build up your own cities and bring in big money. Best part, you can still beat your family and your friends. Whether you charge them rent for iconic Monopoly properties like Boardwalk and Park Place, or you put a heist on your friend's vaults, you do all of that just so you can rise up the Monopoly leaderboards and show everyone just how good you are at the classic game of Monopoly on Monopoly Go. Get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go today, which is now available for free on the App Store or on Google Play. We're also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in America. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL, and baseball is in full swing. That makes FanDuel your best place to bet on every single game in all the leagues. Right now, new customers get $150 back in bonus bets, guaranteed with your first bet, win or lose. That's $150 back you get in point spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon for new customers to get $150 back in bonus bets guaranteed from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Jenna Harner of Channel 11 WPXI. Jenna, let's get back into our first round mocks here. Just playing it out into the Steelers, to the Steelers pick here. You have a few different things happening here before I do. You have you have two defensive linemen going, and Byron Murphy and Jerzon Newton. You have Jared Verse going before them, along with Laitu Latu. Honestly, if I'm a Steelers fan, I would much prefer your board to working things out, because in your board at 20, the Steelers have their choice of Troy Fautanu, J.C. Latham, Amarius Mims, Nate Wiggins, Graham Barton, Adonai Mitchell, all those guys, and Brian Thomas Jr. All of those are guys that I have slotted for them as like those would be amazing picks for them at 20th overall to get. You went with Troy Fautanu. In my board, I had a lot more of the tackles going a little bit earlier, and it just depends on how things go because, again, what do people value here? How many more quarterbacks get taken? We'll see. There's also trades that'll factor into this. I had them taking Talaisi Fuaga because of my top 6. It was him and Mims, and I think Fuaga is a better pure run blocker right now, and they'll put him at right tackle while Broderick Jones goes to left. But I think both of us are looking at, hey, the Steelers want road graders right now, and Fautanu or Fuaga, each of those guys are guys that can change the line of scrimmage and be great pairs long-term with Broderick Jones.
100%. And we know that the Steelers want to build through the trenches. That's something that we've heard Omar Khan, Mike Tomlin, Andy Weidel speak consistently about. That's what Andy Weidel did when he was with the Eagles before coming to the Steelers. And they brought in an offensive coordinator who loves to run the football. Like, all of this just kind of speaks to the Steelers team that they want to be in the future. And I think obviously with what we've seen in terms of the quarterbacks they have here, these guys right now aren't here long-term. That doesn't mean that they can't be here long-term, but the Steelers want to build through the trenches to build for the future. They love what they have in Broderick Jones. That was such a he was such a key piece last year to helping this run game move forward. And again, if Fautanu falls down for the Steelers, I think it's such a fantastic pick. He's got a lot of good length. He's super physical. Steelers fans are going to love that. Not to mention, he has that positional flexibility. He's very athletic, and that's a guy you want to pair on the other side of Broderick Jones in terms of just what this offensive line is going to be able to do in terms of the way they want to have their identity this season and moving forward in the future here.
Absolutely. I think that's a big part of this too, is finding the road graders, finding the guys that are going to change the line of scrimmage, be difference makers at that position. And I think that's what we're both looking at here. Personally, I've just gotten the impression the Steelers, they want to go offensive tackle if they can. This is a great offensive tackle class. Center would be great, and I think they want to get one of those centers in the second round if possible. But picking a center over one of these tackles, if this wasn't a great tackle class, I think center could have been the pick. Like if this was last year where Broderick Jones, Darnell Wright, and Paris Johnson were the offensive tackles and they were gone in the first 14 picks and the Steelers were stuck at 20, I think you would see Graham Barton taken at 20th overall. Yeah. I think it'd be different, but an offensive tackle, which is just a prime position, and again, all of these guys being graded out as like really high value offensive tackles, this is a class you have to take advantage of for an important position like that. So both of us have the Steelers taking tackle guys and also tackle guys from the West Coast. You, Fautanu from Washington, me, Fuaga from Oregon State. But looking at how things play out the rest of the way, I think it's also very interesting to see how the board set up. Neither of us have Zach Frazier going in the first round, which some people think maybe he fits his way into, and that could be the interesting point of conversation. Both of us do have Graham Barton and Jackson Powers-Johnson coming off the board, before the first round ends. But then the question is, Jenna, if the Steelers want to get Zach Frazier, it may not be a question of if they have to trade up. It may be about how far they have to trade up to get him if they want him as their center.
Yeah, that's what's going to be so intriguing to me if he does end up falling into the second round. And I think that is kind of where the Steelers' 2 third-round picks are really going to come in crucial in that moment. And again, we know Omar Khan and how he's been able to wheel and deal up to this point, but that will be very intriguing. If he is sitting there, how far will they have to go? How many spots will they have to jump up to get Frazier in that position? And I'm sure this is something that Omar Khan, that the Steelers scouts, everybody that's going to be in that war room has gone over time and time again. That was something that when Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan spoke with us earlier this week, they said, how they kind of go through things. They don't entirely do the mocks, but they just run through all these different types of scenarios. No doubt Frazier is also a player that they have their targets on. And if they feel like they're not reaching drastically, they're not going to be giving up an insane amount of draft capital. If it's going to be a very solid deal where they don't have to move up a ton, that seems like an absolute no-brainer. The question is, though, is that going to actually happen?
That's where I think things can get very interesting to see. How does it happen? How do you make it work? If you're the Steelers front office, you want to address the center position, but let's say maybe they don't. Hey, wide receiver is a great position to take in the second round. Maybe they think Cedric Van Pran is that guy. And Omar Khan did say there's a handful of guys he thinks could be a fit there. And as we know from Alan Saunders, handful means 5. Jenna, quick question. Did handful always mean 5 to you? I thought it meant like maybe 3 or 4. Like I didn't think it definitively meant 5. That was a weird thing.
That's a good question. I think I would have in my mind said like 5, but like 4 or 5. But I think
right,
5.
Exactly. Like in my hand, I can hold like 4 or 5. Like maybe like I don't not marbles. Marbles are really small, but you get my point. It wasn't defined for me. Anyways, Alan Saunders said he thought I was stupid for thinking it was anything less. I want to talk more about this, but I also want to talk about the restructuring of Alex Highsmith's contract and how that impacts what the Steelers might do in this draft class. We'll do that here in a second here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Jenna Harner, stick with us. We'll be right back. And today's episode is also brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to properly hire. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Jenna Harner of Channel 11 WPXI. Jenna, I want to talk to you about a move the Steelers made, and that was a restructuring of Alex Highsmith's contract that now frees up about $7-ish million in cap space for the Steelers in this offseason. And that had a lot of people raising their eyebrows like, wait a second, what are the Steelers up to? How did they get this done? It should raise them to about, I believe, it should put them at like $18 million under the cap, I believe, at this point here now, which gives them some space to work with here. Granted, I think a lot of people are saying like, oh, so they're trading for Brandon Aiyuk. Duh, that's what's going to happen there. Brandon Aiyuk's probably going to take close to like $30 million to be freed up.
Yeah.
And on top of that, like, let's say they do trade for Brandon Aiyuk and they pay $30 million. Let's say they clear out a total of $30 million in cap space. They still need the money to sign this rookie class, which usually is around $10 million. So I don't think this is that. But I do think it's the Steelers beginning to opening up more cap space in case they do need to sign some free agents after this draft is done.
Yeah, I think this just kind of all goes back to doing their due diligence. I mean, we know that the Steelers like to kind of keep 10 million-ish or so of cap space kind of in a break glass in case of emergency type situation. But it wouldn't surprise me if they're going to go out after the draft and get fill more positions of need that maybe they didn't solidify as much as they wanted to through the draft. But we heard Mike Tomlin again earlier this week talk about the fact that they don't feel thirsty. They don't have these glaring needs. You and I sit here and we're like, wait a second, but you need a center. And wait a second, you need a receiver number 2. Things will all shake out, no doubt. But I think that this is more of just Omar Khan working the magic Omar Khan consistently works. And I think this is the Steelers kind of giving themselves some flexibility for potential moves they may have to make, as well as just kind of, again, keeping some spare change in your pocket for a time when you really might need it.
Absolutely. I do think that's a part of this is just planning ahead, trying to get ahead of things here. Because here's the other thing, like freeing up $7 million, it's part, if you were to make a major move to get big money on the team, it would take a few other moves along with that. Like we would have needed to see if we saw TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith and Minka Fitzpatrick and Cam Hayward and Larry Yoga, like if we saw like a rush of like 4 or 5 players all doing it at the same time, then I would have been like, maybe something's coming. But this is more so signaling to me. It's like, hey, we acknowledge we still, like, after this draft is done, whichever direction you go, even if they land starter capable tackle, center, corner, wide receiver, all 4 in those positions, guess what? They could probably still use either an outside corner or a slot corner, whichever one they don't draft in this class. Guess what? They can still probably use a defensive lineman if they don't get that in this class. There's just so many needs this team still has to fill. That's what I think that move was. So I don't read too much into it here. But Jenna, I want to ask you, just looking at your board here, again, bringing up our mock drafts here. Jenna has the Steelers taking Troy Faltanu of Washington at 20. I have them taking Talaise Fuaga of Oregon State at 20 here. But let's look at non-offensive linemen. We'll even throw centers off the board here. and just look at players who are available on our boards. Your next non-offensive lineman that gets selected here is Nate Wiggins. Then you have Chop Robinson, Adonai Mitchell, Darius Robinson, Kool-Aid McKinstry, and Brian Thomas Jr. Is there any player of that group that entices you at all to say, like, maybe if the tackles don't work, let's say the tackles are all gone by then, if you're looking at a skill position player that you think the Steelers will be very happy to have?
I like Nate Wiggins a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think that obviously with the departure of Levi Wallace, and yes, things were going to shake out and change no matter what, but I think that having two young corners, having a guy opposite Joey Porter Jr. of Wiggins' stature, of just the level of skill he has, I love him. It's so hard for me to get away from tackle and get away from offensive line because I feel like that's where I've been throughout this entire process.
Same.
But I think if a guy like him there, obviously I had Cooper Jean going a little bit higher, but if he's around too, I think you can absolutely go corner. To me, I kind of go back and forth with receiver because of the fact that it is such a deep receiver class. And I know that this sometimes feels like a crutch. And we always say the Steelers are so good at finding deep receivers, late round receivers in the draft, but they really are. And it's such their bread and butter that I think you don't necessarily need to get a receiver crazy early on, especially also with all the talk of some of the teams that need receivers wanting to move up as well. And the Steelers being in that number 20, the quote unquote sweet spot, I don't see them trading down, but I do see teams wanting needs for receivers. I don't entirely think the Steelers want to get receiver crazy early on, but also I sit here and say that, and it doesn't surprise me if they would get a receiver early on.
Right, because they lost Deontay Johnson, and George Pickens, while is highly talented, getting another number 2 receiver with him would be ideal for that situation. You brought up Nate Wiggins, and I think that's an interesting pick here because, when you talk about, we talked about, on this show, the Tomlin Trinity, or as some say, the Tomlin trifecta, where if a lot of the Steelers' first round draft picks over the years have a combined thing of getting a combine official interview, having the top brass of Mike Tomlin and the Steelers GM, either whether it's Omar and Kevin Colbert at their pro day, and being a top 30 visit. There are 3 players in this draft class that all fit that profile. One is Junior Colson, the linebacker out of Michigan. The other is Amarius Mims, the tackle out of Georgia. And the other is Nate Wiggins, the cornerback out of Clemson here, which I think plays right into what you're saying there, in that if the Steelers can't get a prime offensive tackle who's going to dominate the line of scrimmage, imagine if they could get another potential number 1 type of corner the way that Joey Porter Jr. is. And for the next 5 to 8 to 10 years-ish, they just have 2 pillar cornerbacks lining up on the outside, taking away the top 2 options for defenses. Those are things that can be a major asset. Like, for example, I think it's a major asset to the Browns defense that they have Greg Newsome and Denzel Ward there. Everyone talks about Myles Garrett, but without that secondary to give Myles Garrett time to get in the backfield, he probably doesn't even have as much sacks. And again, he doesn't even get as much sacks as TJ Watt in 5 out of his 7 years in the NFL. But if you give TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith 2 shutdown corners who can force quarterbacks to hold the ball a lot longer, that I think only boosts the chances for the Steelers defense to be even more elite than it has been in recent years.
And again, this is a team where I still don't think offense is the biggest strength. This defense is something that this team has relied on for, every year since I've been covering this team, the last 4 seasons, and even beyond that, when Ben was at the tail end of his career. I think that if they can if I feel like it's going to be some sort of offensive lineman, but if for some reason things don't fall that way and a guy like Wiggins is there, I think this makes perfect sense. And I think solidifying your defense is just as solid of a move as adding a strong offensive lineman would be. Obviously, there's definitely a need in that way, but I think that no Steelers fan would look at that pick if a lot of the top tackles are off the board, there isn't that one available, and you say, hey, we're solidifying our defense even more. I don't think there would be a lot of disappointment with that pick.
I'm right with you there. And again, I still wouldn't rule out center at Graham Barton.
Yeah.
If he's there 20th overall, and again, if the offensive tackles are run off the board there, that's totally fine. That's totally fine to accept. But as I've said for basically, a month now, we're looking at this draft class. The Steelers are in a unique position where yes, they have plenty of needs, but they also have positioned themselves where they've talked to enough prospects that you can't predict where they're going to go. And in the past, let's see, of the past 4 first-round picks the Steelers have had, I have correctly predicted on this show, mind you, Devin Bush trading up to get him, trading up to get Broderick Jones, and taking Najee Harris where they took him naturally, where he fell in his NFL draft class. They didn't call Kenny Pickett, and they didn't have a first-round pick in 2020. This is the least sure I have felt about a first-round pick in quite some time. And no, go ahead.
I was just no. It feels like you don't know where they're gonna go. I'm completely agreeing with you.
Yeah, that's where I'm at right now, Jenna. Is that you're saying Faltanu, you're saying I'm saying Fuaga, because this is also a situation where there are so many prospects at a position that they really want to fill, and that's a prime position of value in the NFL, who could all go in different orders. Like it's just also just depends on who takes what before them, because like if Faltanu's gone or Fuaga's gone, then either of our picks it don't matter anymore, and it just matters who else is left there. But again, that's why we've been talking about our top 100 big board. That's why we've been listing players. Quick view of that for our YouTubers here. We have some of our guys here. I have Mims as the last of those tackles, but he is my 17th best player. So again, there's the chance that he's completely gone, and Graham Barton, who's my 20th best player in this draft class, I think he would still be a great addition there. And then even further as we rotate throughout the draft class, we have all sorts of options, but we will keep you up to date with all of those here on the Locked On Steelers podcast as we go through the draft weekend. We will have updates after each pick and full episodes leading into each day. But if you want to get me fresh literally on every single pick, you got to tune into the North Shore Drive podcast and the Pittsburgh Post, because that's live stream, which we'll have from Mike's Beer Bar all night long, Thursday and Friday, from 8 p.m. on Thursday, and I think from 7 p.m. on Friday. Bringing things down with you will be me, Adam Bittner, Jason Mackey, Paul Zeiss, Brian Batko, Ray Fittipaldo. We'll all have our full team available to us there, breaking things down. Join us at Mike's Beer Bar, by the way, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh, when you go to Mike's Beer Bar on the North Shore. And also, if you can't get there, just join us on the live stream. It's on Facebook Live, YouTube, or Twitter here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Jenna, you'll be at the facility, hard-working, representing Channel 11. Thank you so much for working hard here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people know they can find you, follow you, get more of your work.
Well, thank you as always for having me. It was such a joy to be back. I'm sorry it took me so long to get back here. Things have been crazy busy. It's been a lot of vacation time, a lot of going here, there, and everywhere, but we're back. We're ready for draft season. You can find me on Twitter at Jenna Harner 11, Instagram Jenna_Harner, and tune in to WPXI tomorrow afternoon, both on air if you're in the Pittsburgh television market, or online if you live anywhere else and just want some fun draft insight. 12:30 in the afternoon. So, take your lunch break. Tune into Channel 11. We got Inside the Draft Show. I know Chris is a part of this too. So definitely tune in as we get you set for tomorrow night. Then if you want to tune in after the show, 11:15 p.m., we will have full coverage of their first round pick. Hopefully the pick will be in by then and there will be no trades back. And we'll be bringing you everything. We get to talk to whoever they select on a conference call. So we'll be bringing you what the next Steeler is saying about being a Pittsburgh Steeler. Can't wait.
Absolutely. She's Jenna Harner of Channel 11 WPXI here in Pittsburgh. I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here every Monday through Friday along with bonus episodes here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, here on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Thanks again, everyone. We'll see you after the Steelers' first round pick right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.